Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Today I'm going to be talking about another episode from season 6. This is episode 14, The Rumor. If you're enjoying these, please do hit like and subscribe. This episode was written by Kathleen Waite and directed by our very own Ralph Waite. Now, I have frequently talked about some of the interesting and creative things that Ralph does as a director. And this opening shot was one that caught my attention because editing is such a huge part of anything that we watch. You know, it can be edited to make it stronger. It can be edited to make it slower and draggy, or, wrong choices, or, where you put an audience's, a viewer's attention is determined between what the director shoots and then how the editor cuts it together. So in this case, there's a little bit of tricking you as a viewer. So spoiler here, you can skip this little section if you don't want to see any of the Hollywood magic. But we are starting off on the exterior of the house. So this would have been shot on the exterior Walton house set on the back lot. But then as we pan up, going up from the front porch section of the house to ultimately land on John Boy's bedroom, where Elizabeth is sitting at the desk with literally John Boy's glasses on, which are bothering her because she keeps moving them to be able to see because she doesn't need them. But she's sitting at the desk writing. Well, that piece of the scene would have been shot on the interior soundstage because there was no actual bedroom set there on the exterior of the house. When you got up into those areas, there was like a bit of a floor section that was there that you could get up and you could walk along and look out those windows, but there was no room and there were certainly no furniture. So when I looked at that, I went, oh, wow. So it made it look like it was all part of the same house and the same set. But what happens is if you look at it, as the camera is moving up the house, it hits foliage. And when the entire screen is full of foliage, the editor can cut from foliage on the exterior lot to foliage on the interior outside that window. And that's a beautiful place to make an edit. And that is how they trick us as a viewer into thinking that it was all part of the same set. So clever of Ralph to have crafted the shot in this way, and then the editors and the way they filmed it and all of the crew to make it look like that. Jim Bob is working on his shortwave radio, and he is picking up someone speaking German, but he doesn't, of course, understand what any of that means. Now, more fun scenes that Ralph shot, because here we see Mary Ellen and Aaron dancing in the living room to the radio, and we kind of dance over towards the stairs, which brings us to John coming down the stairs, and then Mary Ellen sort of grabs Daddy and dances with him, which takes us back over to where the radio is. So rather than just having to move the camera, they allowed the camera to be, you always want the camera to be motivated by the actor's movement. So actors take the camera someplace. So then Aaron dances with Daddy, and then the boys come down and switch the radio, where we now get news that Germany has invaded the skies of Norway and Denmark. While we're still there in the living room, there's a knock at the door, and a man arrives speaking with a German accent, asking to locate and find Mrs. Flossie Brimmer's boarding house. And we find out that this is a brother-in-law, Willie Brimmer. And so John says that and I think Jim Bob goes with him to show where Mrs. Brimmer lives. Willie comes into Ike's store, and he is looking for work. And Ike says that the only place that there might be work right now would be at John Walton's mill. So Willie asks for directions there. He says, oh, yes, I met them last night. And this is interesting because I've been asked about how far it was from Ike's store to the Walton house. And in this case, Ike explains that it's about a half a mile down the road. So here is a case of us being told about what the distance is, which would kind of make sense because we quite often walked down to Ike's. In fact, we generally did. Katrina, who is Willie's daughter is has made friends and is playing with Elizabeth in the treehouse. Again, just fun that this is an interesting shot. We see them go up into the treehouse, and then this dog sort of arrives, and this dog is Sam, who they aren't familiar with, but then Grandpa comes along and says, oh, this dog belonged to Judge Fraser, who has recently passed away. So his sense is that Sam is just kind of on a walkabout and kind of finding his way, and they say they'll feed him, and we don't get the sense that Sam is not finding food and being fed, but he is choosing not to stay in one place. Because of what's going on in Europe with the escalation of Germany invading other countries, there is a lot of suspicion and fear of anybody who's German, and Buck decides that somehow Willie is a spy, or he's looking to form a fifth column here in Walton's Mountain. Why they would do that in Walton's Mountain, who knows? But he goes to Epp and wants Epp to do something about it. And Epp is like, this is not something, what am I going to do? He's allowed to move here. He's not doing anything. None of this is illegal. But Buck is determined to stir up trouble. We see Jim Bob, who is having dinner with Willie and his wife and his daughter. And Willie talks about how difficult it was. They came from Germantown, Pennsylvania, and how difficult it has been for him there now that with what's going on in Europe, that people stopped talking to him. They became suspicious. They felt he was a threat. And so that's why he moved from there, thinking that someplace else he would feel more welcome and would just be able to live a normal life. Jim Bob tells him about his shortwave radio and that he's hearing German, and maybe Willie could come and listen and help him understand maybe what they're saying, and also maybe help him get a better reception on the radio. So he does. He comes over, and they're trying to hear the German words, and Willie says that if he put the shortwave higher on the mountain, he would probably get better reception. Here we have a moment of Sam playing with Reckless, which is just really sweet. I mean, there is no particular reason to have this whole scene of the dogs playing, but it just adds a little bit of a human touch and some fun and sort of some softer moments within an episode that was really about threats and danger and fear. So balancing that out with some just heartwarming, touching things, I think really made the Waltons so special. While Willie and Jim Bob move the shortwave up higher on the mountain, they're listening and they're hearing some German words. Buck is continuing his quest to incite trouble for Willie and to stir up other members of the community. He's at the barber shop and he is busy trying to rally people to his side who, just again, spreading fear and antagonism and looking to incite violence, really, against this man just simply because he has a German accent. This is further driven by the fact that Willie has been waiting for a package, and he goes to Ike's store, and Ike isn't there. Cora Beth is trying to find the package. Willie gets on the phone to call Germantown to, get information on the package. And Buck is there, and he overhears Willie speaking in German to someone, and it's a doctor. So Buck, of course, instills all kinds of other meaning to this conversation. And as it turns out, it is medicine that Willie needs. And he was talking to his doctor in Germantown in German because the doctor doesn't speak much English. He's from the old country. So it's all very innocent, but really getting blown out of proportion. Willie and his family are going to be moving into a house that is a little further up the way from where the Waltons are. And Elizabeth and Katrina go over there one day when they're just out playing. And Sam comes by, the dog, and they have shut him in the cabin in the house, thinking that they don't want the dog to wander off. But Grandpa comes along and says, no, let the dog out, that, he is in his sort of final phase of his life, and his grandpa senses that the dog is looking for some place to go wander off. He knows he's going to be dying soon, and he's looking for a place to go die with dignity, and that the children should allow him that. And there's a lovely sort of shot of the dog kind of looking back at Grandpa, silhouetted against beautiful lighting, and just another sweet moment. Throughout this episode, Elizabeth has been writing in a journal. She's sort of being John Boy in a way. She was inspired by John Boy's journal writing, and then all of her reading. She was always interested in mystery stories and things, and had a connection to a couple of teachers and a woman in New York who wrote these mystery stories. And but she's basically writing down everything she hears, and so all these various different rumors and things that she's hearing that she doesn't necessarily know how to properly interpret in terms of their context. She's repeating, not that what she's repeating isn't the correct words, but the context is missing. And so she is inadvertently stirring up a lot of this fear in some of the members of the community, because they said, well, she said, this is what she said. And Elizabeth's like, yeah, that's what, I heard, and that's what I wrote. And but because of this, they're using that information to rally up a gang, and this gang sort of arrives at the mill where Willie has been working, and he and John are working, and this truck of men shows up, threatening Willie and wanting him and wanting to take him. And we know that that means they're going to beat him up or drive him out of town or whatever. And John is very emphatic about standing up for Willie and saying, no, you stay here. And he protects Willie, and he basically, confronts the other men and talks them down. And, and it is explained that the box that Willie got that they're so afraid of, and them thinking he's a German spy or whatever, that it was just medicine and what happened. And so the men sort of calm down and leave, but we're left with Elizabeth sort of saying, well, was this my fault? That they were basically acting on rumors from Elizabeth. And, and John saying, how silly is this, that you are all ready to engage in violence because of rumors from a little girl? And so it is really, very much a message about these kinds of things and how they start and how rumors fly, and, what the truth actually is. And that when they actually look at what the truth is, they see that there really is no danger there. A number of guest actors and recurring characters in this episode. Joe Connolly and Ronnie Claire were back as Ike and Corbeth Godsey. Matthew Andon played Willie Brimmer. Ellen Blake played Marta Brimmer, his wife. Tasha Lee Zemris played the daughter, Katrina Brimmer. Barry Cahill was once again Buck Vernon. Hal Bokar was Fisk. And Larry D. Blake was Charlie, the barber. Of course, John Crawford was back as Sheriff Ep Bridges. Always great to have him back. And then we had a couple of voice actors. Chris Anders provided the German voice that we heard on the shortwave radio, and John Heisted was the radio announcer on the radio. Thank you for joining me for this segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons about the season 6 episode, The Rumor. I will be back with more Behind the Scenes of the Waltons, more of your questions and another Ask Judy, and more special guests. Thanks for watching.